Hi, everybody. Welcome to this episode of IGN House Call. And today we have a very special guest. Please welcome Mark Fillon. Hi, Mark. Introduce yourself and your road to being a game developer.
Hey everyone, glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me. I haven't been I haven't been a game designer that long. It's only since 2016. And This upcoming game, Chinatown Detective Agency, is our second game. But I've been a player much longer than that. I suppose you could say that um, the first thing I ever did as a game designer would be modding. So I started modding when I was still in high school. Yeah, that eventually led to just a lot of interest in actually dipping my toes into game design. And in 2016, we made our first game called Terroir, which is very different from Chinatown Detective Agency. Terroir is a game where you make wine. So it's a winemaking simulation game. And then eventually, me and my team thought, all right, for the second game, it's time to make something bigger, more ambitious. And Chinatown Detective Agency was what eventually came of that.
Nice. From winemaking to cyberpunk. Now, we're very excited about this game. So please tell us how the entire idea for Chinatown Detective Agency came about. Carmen Sandiego meets cyberpunk? Whoa.
So it really did start with my my obsession with the old Carmen Sandiego series. So I grew up in the '90s. I played those old school Carmen Sandiego games, and as we were brainstorming when we were in pre-production, we were thinking about what next game to make. We thought, what's a game mechanic that we've encountered, very rarely, that was really intriguing. And I thought this idea that you had to do real world research in order to advance in the game, like you do in the old Carmen Sandiego games, where you had to do actual research to answer questions within the game. I thought that was a fantastic mechanic that not a lot of mainstream games seem to be using.
Hmm.
So we thought, oh, wouldn't it be cool if the Carmen Sandiego games grew up? What if we used that mechanic to tackle more mature themed storylines and plots. So we thought, perfect. And so I live in Singapore. I've been here for quite some time, and I thought this would make a great setting for a hard-boiled detective story. It's and I'm sure you've been to the city quite often.
Oh, yeah.
It's very futuristic, but it's got a very cool rustic side to it, at least from the colonial era. It's got that very cool historical side to it, and I thought it would be great to have a detective story take place in a futuristic city that's still sort of desperately clinging on to its historical roots. That would make for a great setting. And lo and behold, it pretty much wrote itself. I assembled a team together, and the entire team that worked on Chinatown Detective Agency are located around the world,
Hmm.
which is great for a game that has you traveling all over the world. The artist responsible for this game, beautiful art, is Ricardo Yuham, who's based out of Brazil, and then our technical director Jenny out of the UK, and then our animators and sound designers from all over Europe and North America, and even our graphic designers here in Southeast Asia. So it really is an apt team to work for this kind of game.
Nice. Very globally minded. We like that. Let's just add on to that. How did you and your team kind of craft this futuristic version of Singapore? And how much of it will come true in the near future, you think? Do you think Bogey Street will have like more neon stuff? Or the Merlion will shoot like lasers out of its mouth? What do you think?
I wouldn't be surprised if it did. It was like, it was a lot of just world building and imagination. Funny fact, when Ricardo started working on this game, when he started working on the environments in here in Singapore, he had never been to Singapore.
Oh,
I,
wow.
I had to use a combination of reference images and like Google Street View to show
Mm.
him what these places looked like. But eventually, thankfully, he managed to come down and visit me. And it was actually the year when we went over to Kuala Lumpur to KL for the game show there, Level Up.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. But yeah, that's it was we imagined that in the year 2037, the world would be a much darker place. Economic stagnation, political turmoil
Mm.
would mean that a a majority of the governments around the world are failing their citizens, and
Oh.
that includes the police force. And because of that, people are starting to turn to private detectives to do their detective work. To pursue justice for them, I suppose. And that lore kind of was the lore was really interesting when it came to how that would apply to Singapore. Because as you know, Singapore is a very orderly place,
Oh yeah.
right?
The
Very
fine
well,
city.
yeah, exactly. Very well organized. The government's very reliable.
Mhm.
So it would be very interesting if we added that twist of what if everything went upside down?
Hmm.
What if crime shot up and it just became a much more scary place to be? And it would again a perfect setting for a hard-boiled detective story.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Is chewing gum still outlawed in the future?
chewing gum is still outlawed as of April 6, 2022, unless it's got a medical purpose. So like a nicotine gum is allowed.
Yeah. All right. All right. So speaking of your main character, what were the inspirations and references that went into Amira Dharma?
Okay, so I knew right off the bat that I wanted the protagonist to be female. I just thought that we needed more, more badass female protagonists. Being a father to a daughter, I wanted, when my daughter grows up, I wanted to make sure that she had games to play with characters that she could look up to. So I thought that was kind of important. Amira is sort of an amalgamation of qualities that I would admire in a detective kind of persona. So she's calm and cool headed, right? Which you have to be in desperate, dangerous situations. And she's also very secretive about her past. There's two reasons for that. It's because we wanted to make her, we wanted to allow her character to be uncovered in layers over time, not just just put it upfront immediately. And secondly, that would also allow for this is gonna sound a little bit how do you say strategic, I suppose, but it
Okay.
also allows for future expansion of her story. We can take her in
Okay.
different directions if
We
we
see.
don't. Yeah, if we don't immediately reveal who she is. And I think she also is a little bit strong-headed. There's that very clear, very thin line between bravery and stubbornness, right? And Amir is constantly walking that. It's probably because, well, her father was also an ex-cop, so she sort of lives in his shadow a little bit. But she wants to trailblaze her own way, and that sort of is reflected in her the way she interacts with people a little bit.
All right. So is she like the complete opposite of Carmen Sandiego? Because Carmen Sandiego was like a femme fatale thief. She was like against the law.
Yeah, well, I think the recent version of Carmen Sandiego, the one that's on Netflix, I think Amira and her share a lot in common. They're both very strong-willed. They're both very determined, and they've both been sort of, if you will, they've both been chewed up and spit out by their past, right? They've had rough going during their past. But the old school Carmen Sandiego was much more mysterious, right? You didn't know too much about this person, this figure, and her international crime syndicate.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, so there's a little bit of both in Amira.
Cool. Did you watch like the '90s cartoon? Like,
Oh, you bet. Yeah, I mean,
the theme song's running in my head right now.
same here. How can it not? Yeah, for sure.
Nice. Okay, so besides Carmen Sandiego, what other games do you think are in the DNA of Chinatown Detective Agency?
Definitely your classic point and clicks from the 90s. Ricardo, our art director, is a huge fan of the Sierra and LucasArts, point and clicks from the 90s. I've personally played quite a few of them. Personal favorite is Grim Fandango.
Ooh,
Um, I don't want to embarrass myself. I don't know if that is from the 90s or if it's technically already in the 2000s. But it's
Yeah.
games like that, Secret of Monkey Island,
Mm-hmm.
um, all those really great, fantastic point and clicks. Um, oh, Siberia, I played that. That was really good. But I think that's not 90s anymore. Sorry, I just had to put that in. That was a very enjoyable game. But yeah, back to your question, it's really those classic point and click games that didn't hold your hand.
Mm.
Those point and clicks from the 90s were extremely difficult. You would be
Mm.
stuck for hours or days on a particular puzzle. They did not hold your hand. You had, well, at least we didn't have a readily available internet to check, what the solutions were. Same thing with Chinatown Detective Agency. There are puzzles in there that we intended to be so difficult we'd like you to spend hours thinking about it, walk away from the computer and actually think about it and do real research on it. And at least from our early days, from our testing and from people playing our demos, a few have done that, and they've enjoyed that process, that experience. However, it's also important to add that at least in this day and age, you have to offer players a way out. So there's a
Mhm.
character in the game named Mei Ting, a librarian, who, if you call her, she'll give you the solution to the puzzles if you've given up, if you just want to
Ah,
progress in the game. Simply
nice.
call Mei Ting, she'll give you the answer to the puzzles.
Okay, cool. So that's kind of your way of modernizing this old genre, huh?
Correct. I
Yeah.
think I think these days, a lot of people sometimes play games just for the narrative. So if people
Mm,
simply want the story to progress, just to see how the story unfolds, they don't really want to get stuck on a puzzle. There's that way out for them.
nice. So, is the prologue demo like super integral? Like, does everybody need to play that? You think?
Well, they can. It's the first three missions of the main game.
Ah, okay.
Uh, yeah, but as with most prologues and demos, it kind of leaves you hanging.
Yeah.
So I would personally just wait for the full game, because post prologue is when things get really interesting. When
Ooh.
we have an achievement in there called Further Down the Rabbit Hole, which unlocks after the prologue because the plot really thickens after that. So, in order to not be disappointed, I think the full game would be a better
All
experience.
right. Cool. We've heard it here first. Let's do it. So, are there multiple endings for the game? You know how like point and click, like there's like specific death, like animations you can unlock and stuff.
Yes. So the game's made up of three story arcs.
Mm.
It depends on which of the three available clients you want to work for, and depending on those, so depending on which client you choose, you get to play missions that are only available in that story arc, and that's going to vastly affect how the ending plays out. The ending is modular,
Ooh.
so without revealing too much, it's modular. So really, your decisions affect the outcomes of that.
Modular ending. Okay, I don't think I've heard that before. So, I think you hinted at this a bit, but will there be DLCs, expansions, or just straight up sequel? You know?
Yeah, we are actually already in the midst of working on the DLC content. I think as the schedule goes, there's going to be content around side missions,
Ooh.
that we want to make available to the players as soon as possible. And the side missions really, so they're not at all connected to the main arcs.
Okay.
They're just there for world building and for fun and just diversions, which I think is quite important for a game like this. But for the actual official DLCs, we've already started working on those. The first one, Marigold Empire, is takes place on a cruise ship, and I'm afraid that's all I can reveal. So yeah, that's something we're working on.
Wow. All right, that's some Agatha Christie stuff. Okay. I think okay, you mentioned this a little bit, but what other favorite games did you have growing up?
Oh, to be honest with you, the games I love to play are the very well, at least back in those days, were the very geeky games.
Mm-hmm.
City building games, like I remember in high school playing games like Caesar 3. But I was also a huge fan of RPGs like Baldur's Gate, Neverwinter Nights, if you remember that.
Mm-hmm.
Those were my jam. But these days, I play everything. I play everything from what am I playing right now? Dota. Isn't that so Southeast Asian? I play Dota.
Yeah, it's the regional pastime.
It's the regional pastime. I play a lot of Dota because it's quick and easy, right? You jump into a game and then and then you're done after one round. Right down to I play Fortnite with my daughter.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, but again, narrative is super important to me. So I love,
Mm.
my personal favorite game in recent history, meaning the past 10 or 15 years, would be the Fallout series.
Oh,
Fallout
nice.
series, yeah, New Vegas, yeah. That's yeah. Those are my, those are the kinds of games that I like to play.
Cool. Oh, yeah. So, Chinatown Detective Agency is like the first Southeast Asian game to be on Game Pass, I think.
No way. Are you serious?
From what we've checked. You know,
Wow.
because
That
like
would
the closest thing was Coffee Talk, but that was an
yeah.
Xbox Live Gold game. It wasn't part of Game Pass.
Right. That's amazing, dude.
Yeah, you're blazing a trail here. How does it feel?
Oh, mind blown. But very, very humbled for one thing, and we've got our we've got our publishers to thank for that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's super. Wow, man.
Mhm. Yeah. Any advice for other Southeast Asian developers to kind of get on the service?
Absolutely. I used to think, right? I used to think that stuff like this, like getting onto a relatively big stage,
Yeah.
getting involved with Game Pass was unattainable for game developers in our region, simply because I thought that the decision makers, who would usually be based, in the States or Europe, didn't pay attention to any of us. But it's absolutely not true. We're gaining a lot of ground there. There are a lot of studios and developers in Southeast Asia that are making really, really interesting games.
Yeah.
Very, very, very cool games. And I think the past few years we've started to get noticed. If there's, I suppose if there's one piece of advice of like practical advice as a game
Mhm.
designer, for anyone out there in the region, is to really take your time. Chinatown Detective Agency was 4 years in the making. I know there are some developers out there who want to prove themselves and get the game out in 18 months just to
Yeah.
get something out there, right? But you could do that if you have money. But if you're like the rest of us, where you're just new to the game and trying to make an impression, really take your time and hone your craft. Really pay attention to narrative. Really pay attention to finesse and polish, because that stuff matters.
Right. Nice. Can't rush art, right?
Yeah, no, you can.
Okay. Cool. All right. Final question. What's your kind of message to the world? Any final thoughts? Any kind of final feelings you want to just bring it out?
I've always thought that games were a unifying force. So let's just play. Let's just stop arguing. Let's argue less and play games together more. Perhaps even play Chinatown Detective Agency. Together more. It's a great group game.
Yeah. Right. It's kind of like a escape room kind of thing where we all can figure it out together, right?
Perfect, exactly. So we've seen streamers have a fun time playing Chinatown because their fans and supporters are always chiming in with clues and stuff. So it's quite a great game to play together with friends or when you're playing in a group. But yeah, I suppose that's it. And we're very, very excited to be here, to finally be here after 4 years. We're on the cusp of release. It's coming out on April 7th. We're really looking forward to what people think about it, because it's a living game. It's still being expanded and developed as we speak.
Nice. And we can't wait for everybody to play it. Spoiler alert, we already have our code, so
Awesome. I hope you guys like.
yeah. Oh yes. I'll link you our review.
Awesome. That's great.
And with that, thank you so much, Mark, for talking to us this morning. This was great, and can't wait for the launch.
No, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Very happy to be here.
All right, and that's it for this episode of IGN House Call. We'll catch you guys next time. Bye.